you've used slang, whether you just said, I'm low-key too tired for this, or I'm high-key really excited to hear these kids speak, you've definitely used at least some form of slang in your life. And that's because slang is everywhere. It is so prevalent, the repository of words so vast, that it can almost form its own language. The ideas behind words of slang can be profound and pernicious, intricate and intimate, comical and confounding, or to sum it up, slang is never dead. Until we understand and appreciate slang, we aren't fully connecting with one another. We live in a time where conversations are often limited to abbreviated texts and emojis, and we also live in a time where discourse can break down easily and opinions can become more oppositional than productive. Slang, in many cases, has been the answer to that. I'm here to prove that slang is not just a facet of dialect that should be shunned and disregarded, or in other words, hated on, but rather one that is brimming with history, alive with cultural significance, and an important tool in finding a sense of belonging in our rapidly changing society. My name is Camille Davis. I'm super excited to speak about slang, and I hope you will come to appreciate it as much as I do. So what actually is slang? Oxford Languages will tell you that slang is a type of language that consists of words and phrases that are regarded as very informal. I prefer the definition of S.I. Hayakawa, a former academic, linguist, and US senator, and he will tell you that slang is the poetry of everyday life. One of the biggest reasons poetry has had such an impact on our world is because it possesses the ability to connect people and allow us a sense of belonging. Slang does exactly that, and yet it is often looked down upon. People tend to see it as an unbecoming distortion of proper English with little respectable function that should even be abandoned. This is a false notion. Slang is, at its core, an expression of a shared identity, and therefore a celebration of belonging. Since I was very young, slang has been an integral part of my identity. When I didn't know a word or expression for something, I'd just make one up. One of the first instances of this happening started when I was around 4. When a fruit, particularly a mango, was sour and unripe, I would call it English, just because the way the word English sounded on my tongue seemed perfect for an unripe mango. I've always had a love for words, real and made up. When my sister and I were younger, we would also develop secret code words, sometimes out of exuberant play, but mostly to communicate things we didn't want our parents to understand. In this practice, we created a special belonging. When these bonds are extended across entire cultures and entire communities, they also create this extended sense of belonging. In grade school, slang was a sneak peek into the teenage world. When I would hear older kids using words that I didn't understand, it naturally piqued my interest, and then when you get to use those words yourself, you become part of that belonging. Same thing when I first heard hip-hop. The creative wordplay and language captivated me, as with anyone who loves music. And as a person with a biracial background, it is also especially interesting to see how slang functions as a bridge between disparate cultures. Korean slang, African American slang, or crossovers from one group to another all work to exemplify the power of slang to break boundaries. For instance, the word fighting in Korea is removed of the physical combat meaning to take on a definition of good luck, which conveys a sense of strength and solidarity. Speaking of fighting, when Muhammad Ali referred to himself as the greatest of all time, he simultaneously founded the term GOAT, which came to describe any amazing athlete and then any person who's the best in their trade. At a time of deep socio-political polarization, slang can be a window into the way society thinks, by allowing us visibility into how they interpret words and meanings. What's so important about slang is that it's about us, our cultures, our shared experience, what each generation experiences, our values and our commentary on our current world. African American vernacular is a perfect example for illustrating the significance of slang. Over the course of the 20th century, African American vernacular, also known as AAVE, Ebonics, or Black English, began permeating throughout the US and has since become embedded in the English language. If you don't know what African American vernacular sounds like, it tends to be characterized by habitual be or been before subject, or double negations such as nobody with any sense isn't going. And while the misconception still stands that African American vernacular is a broken and lazy way of speaking, it merely follows its own rules, and is just as enlightened as Standard English. Zora Neale Hurston studied African American vernacular as part of her investigation into African American folklore and culture. Poets, jazz musicians, as well as hip hop, funk, rock and roll, soul, have all incorporated African American vernacular as an influential factor in global arts and style. However, here's what you might not know. African American vernacular isn't actually slang. No, much of slang simply came from it. Black English could have originated from West African languages. It could have twisted and formed out of Creole. Even expert linguists still haven't been able to track it down exactly. But what we do know is that it is rich with African culture, and it didn't come from random pronunciations and lazy abbreviations. Only when masses of people in the US began taking inspiration from African American vernacular did it turn into its own form of slang. In this way, the modern slang and the trending terms that you see proliferate on social media have been attributed to Black culture as a whole. But this shouldn't be the case. What we need to recognize is that both Black English and slang are beautiful creations, intertwined, yes, but not the same. And so when you use these words that you overheard on TikTok or you saw a certain group of friends using, it's not all just fun and cool, although it is that too, but it's a celebration of the African American culture where it came from. Therefore, Black English has served as a source of inspiration for communities far beyond the ones that it came from. It exists in all kinds of music, far beyond just the ones I've spoken about today, and exists on the tongues of all kinds of people, far beyond just African Americans themselves. Black English has served to bind a boundless community and string disparate cultures into one belonging. But what is so special about slang in these instances is that even as it spreads miles, countries, even continents forward, it still serves to tell the story and empower the culture of its originators. Throughout my life, I've written stories and crafted tales, all with the hopes of conceiving and connecting with the world around me. It is by weaving these words into forms of self-expression that we humans have been able to connect despite vast distances, different beliefs, and a diversity of cultures. Although the usage of casual slang would surely be prohibited in any of my analytical paragraphs or papers, it is when we connect with each other here in the present with only our authentic words that we are truly able to belong. Slang will live on, and in that, the stories of our youth will live on too. If not for our stories, we would not have our communities. And if not for our communities, we would lose the belonging in what it means to be a human. Thank you so much.